Oops. Hold on 1 second. All right, sorry about that. Just realized that I usually like to plug in the landline when I'm doing streams, and I started the stream up and realized I hadn't plugged in physically. So I went ahead and fixed that. This is part 2. My looking at Forbidden Lands, the core game. Let's see, I will post a link. You can see where it is on drive-through. We made it up to skills last time, and that's right to call quits. Hopefully, I'll be able to get more into it. I don't want to be down there. It's good. So looking at skills, to recap a little bit from the earlier look. Phone's going off. It's an interesting system. It's kind of OSR-ish, but it uses a different sort of mechanic. It seems to be you have sort of occupations, but that you're not leveling them up like classes. You're leveling up skills. Had some interesting stuff with creating backgrounds, things like that. I didn't always love what they did with some of the backgrounds because they had this element which I appreciated, in which you would connect your character to other characters in the party, but sometimes those connections were actually hostile, which to me seemed a little bit self-defeating, but don't have a way of knowing what their intent is specifically on those. But in any case, so we're going to get into skills. Let's see their little intro here. A role-playing game is a conversation. The game master describes the scene. You describe how your PCs behave. The GM describes how any NPCs react. You reply, and it goes back and forth. That is how the story is told and progresses. But sooner or later, a decisive situation will arise, a point of no return, a conflict that conversation alone cannot resolve. Then it's time to break out the dice and use one of your skills. All right, so there we have. I mean, this is your standard. Hey, this is a little bit of what an RPG is about. I kind of like that they have it in different places. I know they have the standard boilerplate at the beginning, but it's nice to, if you're new, here's a little refresher about how they envision things to work. I also appreciate here that it's a little bit subtle, but they're essentially saying that you don't need to, and maybe even you shouldn't deploy skills every time you want to do something, but it's only when you reach these pivotal moments, right? That what they call that point of no return. So you can banter back and forth, and the expectation is not that you're rolling a skill every time you want to say something, but it's a key moment where you want to do it. So, to use a silly example, if you're not feeling great, you're feeling a little bit sick, and your PC feels a little bit sick, but they go to somewhere and someone says, "Oh, how are you feeling?" And PC goes, "Oh, I'm okay, I'm fine." Right? They're not going to ask you to roll a deception. It's not important unless it is. Unless you've got the plague, you're trying to hide it, do something like that. But assuming you're just not feeling well, it's a stomach bug, it's not the coronavirus. You just say, "Hey, I'm feeling all right," and you're fine. But if someone asks you, "Hey, where were you on this night when the Duke was assassinated?" And you try to deceive at that point, then that might be a key moment. That one might be one where you'd want to roll the dice for. Let me adjust my camera slightly. I'm gonna get cut off a little bit. Move this up just a bit. All right. Roll the dice. There are 16 skills in total in the game, and they are all described later in this chapter. Every skill is connected to one of the 4 attributes: strength, agility, wisdom, and empathy. Right. So just to kind of refresh, you're noticing that there are a couple of things missing, right? There's no charisma, there's no constitution. I think those are the only 2, right? So wits, it would be, I presume, the intelligence stand-in, empathy, the wisdom stand-in, strength and agility dex, strength, but no constitution, no charisma. When you perform an action, you first describe what your player character does or says. Then you grab a number of 6-sided dice equal to your skill level plus your current score in the attribute that is connected to that skill. If you have some sort of gear that may be helpful, you will get extra dice from that as well. Then you roll all the dice at once. Okay. All right, so they're basically describing, this is an interesting way to put it, because this is kind of not the way I would want to play. I think I would, and again, I don't know their intent, I think I would want to phrase this differently. I'm of the camp that you as a player describe what you want to the GM, and the GM will then determine if a skill check is needed, what skill to roll. Not, which this one seemed to imply at least, is, oh, I want to try to do this to the wizard, and then suddenly I'm rolling dice. Whereas I would say, no, slow down. Tell me what you want to do. I'll tell you what role's applicable, if any, and then you roll it. But that's me. Anyway, this is just procedural at this point. 6s mean successes. To succeed with your action, you must roll at least 1 6. A 6 is called a success, and these are marked in the rules with a symbol of 2 crossed swords. Ching ching. If you're more than 1, ching ching, success. You can achieve additional effects in some cases. This is specified for each skill. Okay, I like that. So it's got a way of, essentially levels of success depending on how many of those 6s you roll. 1s wear you down. 1s can be bad for you. They can mean that you suffer damage, exhaustion, fear, or that your weapon has been damaged. 1s have no effect on your first roll, only if you choose to push your roll. 1 is called a bane. It is marked with the skull symbol. Oh, bane. All right, so here's another interesting little mechanical piece. You do something once, you roll 1s, no biggie. You push it, which I don't know what other systems it's come from, but when I think of pushing, I think of the kind of Call of Cthulhu. You can fail something, and then you can decide to push your luck and try again, and that's when you can succeed under fire, which is great, or by pushing your luck, you end up bringing more bad things upon you. And in this case, those bad things will be if you roll a bunch of 1s after you've pushed. Different colors. Whether a certain die you have rolled originates from your attribute, your skill, or your gear may be important. For that reason, you should use dice of 3 different colors. The dice from attributes are called base dice, the dice from skills are called skill dice, and the dice from gear are called gear dice, or weapon dice, specifically for weapons. All right. And you can buy some custom dice for the game. They have that available if you want. I mean, the idea of using different colors is great, right? It's not always possible. You might not have. I mean, you usually think of all RPG players as having tons and tons of dice of every color and shade. I actually don't have that many dice. I mean, I have a bag of dice, but I probably don't have 3 sets of a bunch of 6s. Just because for, D&D kind of games, I mean, look, if you grew up playing Shadowrun, you might have bags of D6s around different things, or I think Shadowrun was D6. Gosh, it's been so. I mean, I only played Shadowrun first edition, so forgive me if I missed the boat on what Shadowrun's done in the last 20 some odd years. But you might not have a bunch of dice, but it's a good idea. Rolls without skill. If you don't have the skill required for a particular action you want to perform, you can roll anyway. Simply roll your base dice and any applicable gear dice. All right, let's see this example. Josie's sorcerer, Nermena, is exploring a ruined castle along with her fellow adventurers. Suddenly, an undead ghoul comes out of the shadows and lifts its rusty sword to strike Nermena. She turns and runs towards the tower to find safety there, but stops in her tracks as the floor has collapsed in front of her. She decides to leap across the chasm. Nermena has agility 3, but no skill level in move. She gets to roll only the base dice to make the jump. All right, so there's a couple of things. I guess we want to unpack this a little bit. Notice that, say, in D&D, we might say, well, how wide is that cavern? What's your movement, or chasm? What's your movement rate? Is this within X, Y, or Z? And then that would help determine the difficulty of the skill. Here, at least in this example, we're not concerned with that. We're playing it a little bit fast and loose. We're assuming that she gets this chasm, that it is wide enough to hypothetically jump, because otherwise the GM just didn't say it is too wide for you to cross, or sorry, right? So it's within the realm of possibility that she can cross it. So we're not worrying about what her movement rate is. We're not worried about what her her jump is. Obviously, she doesn't have the move rate, but we don't have a set, okay, you can jump 1/3 of your movement rate as your jump, and so we're going to get out a calculator, we're going to count squares, right? We're not concerned about any of that. We're just concerned about, here's this thing, jump to get over, which I feel like is in that kind of theater of the mind sort of OSR style. I mean, I oftentimes when I'm playing and running an old school game, I don't get caught up in how many squares, but usually because I'm not playing with a map. So and the PCs, I don't assume the PCs have yardsticks and things to measure things out. So does it look like you can cross it? Yeah, it does, right? So try it, and we'll find out. So in this case, move, I assume we'll get the full description, but that I guess is the stand-in for like an athletics type skill. And that, but you can roll agility 3. So then you can think about it. What's 1 in 6 odds, but you're getting 3 dice. I don't know. I could go into any dice and figure out the exact what your odds are of rolling a 6, but I feel like it's not too bad. Best of 3 rolls. So you got an okay chance if you're fairly agile. You might make it, but then you might not. And the other one is, the other side of it, which I do appreciate, is that you could have a low agility, but you could max out your move, right? You could have a move skill of 4, even if your agility is just 1, it still gives you more dice than somebody who has agility 3. The art of failure. If you roll no, ching ching, success, something goes wrong. For some reason, you failed to achieve your goal. Feel free to elaborate on why with the help of the GM. She might even let a failed roll have further consequences to move the story forward in a dramatic way. All right, so right there, tack they're taking is somewhat of a shared fiction, shared story, right? You didn't make it across that chasm. What happened? Right, where are you? And then potentially, it's a conversation, right? And so then you say, oh well, she jumped, but she slipped, but she's grabbing on with her fingertips and holding on to the near end because she realized at the last second she wasn't going to make it. Okay, great. Now she's hanging there, and that does add some tension. Hopefully there are other characters around and not just that ghoul. Was it a ghoul? Yeah, that ghoul there to then just bite her fingers off or pull her up and consume her. Okay, so here we have a list of the 16 skills: might, endurance, melee, crafting, stealth, sleight of hand, move, marksmanship, scouting, lore, survival, insight, manipulation, performance, healing, and animal handling. All right, so I'm trying to think if there's anything. I don't see anything missing, and we don't have I guess the way the game is set up, there's not really a religion skill, but it's probably not needed. Just the way the background and everything is. I'm not sure I see anything else that's standing out as, oh my gosh, this isn't here. We do have crafting. It's strength, so that's interesting. So maybe that's physical crafting, like you're making a bow or you're fletching and you're making arrows and things like that. You're making stuff as opposed to potion crafting, which I would assume would not be strength. Yeah, so that seems like a decent list, and of course we could always add to it if we so chose. So did I miss something? Failure must not stop the story completely. Even when you fail, there must be a way forward, perhaps at the cost of time, risk, or silver, but still a way. The GM has the final say on the consequences of failure in that particular situation. So they're giving us the, the fail forward, right? You don't put a door in front of the party, and the only way forward is for them to get through the door, and then none of the party can get through the door, so what are they going to do? They're stuck. So always make sure there's a way forward. All right, and then, but if you fail, you have one last chance. If you really want to succeed, you can push the roll. So again, I always think of this in terms of Call of Cthulhu, but it probably is in a number of systems. Pushing a roll. If you are desperate to succeed with a skill roll, you can choose to push it. This means that you grab all the dice that did not come up a 6, cha-ching, or a 1, bane, and roll them again. You get a new chance to roll ching-ching success. You cannot choose which dice to re-roll. All right. Well, I mean, you are kind of choosing which dice to re-roll, right? I guess you can't choose which pools. So if you have a pool for your attributes, you have a pool for your gear, you have a pool for your skills, you can't choose just to re-roll your this or that, right? So if you're hoping, if something's going to fail, I hope it's my gear and not my strength, you don't have that choice. Here's a box text. Don't roll too often. In Forbidden Lands, a dice roll is a dramatic moment. Pushing rolls can give you damage, but also willpower points. Rolling dice too often slows the game down and can generate an excess of willpower points. Thus, you should only roll dice when absolutely necessary in dramatic situations or tough challenges. In any other situation, the GM should simply state that your action succeeds. And there's a typo. So this is, again, right, we want to roll when it's important. We don't want to roll just to roll. I think that's good advice for any game. Let it ride. I don't know necessarily this means that, hey, you should succeed, though. I feel like, let the players roll what they have if it makes sense. If you're a ranger of the north and someone asks you what the weather was, whatever, and they, just let them say, oh yeah, it's this, right? You don't need to challenge them. You don't need to make it difficult just to be difficult. But when you need it, when it is an important point, it is, like they said before, it's kind of an inflection point or a turning point, a potential dramatic twist, then yeah, you want to roll the dice. We haven't yet seen what willpower points are, so I don't know what that means, but presumably that's a positive thing you could get for pushing. When you push, you must roll all dice that did not come up a ching success or bane. You are allowed to push rolls even after a successful roll, but only if rolling additional ching success will increase the effect of the roll in some way. I think I'm done with making the sword noises. It's going to be too taxing on me. The GM has final say on this. Pushing a roll is not without risk. More on that below. So you can, if you succeed barely and you want to succeed more, you can also push. Right? So I like that. A little extra risk might give you a little extra reward, even if you already have some reward. See, how pushed rolls play out in story terms depends on what kind of action you are performing. It doesn't have to be a physical effort. It might be about complex mental focus or an emotional struggle. Skill dice. When you push a roll, ones from the skill dice do not count as bane and can be re-rolled even if they do come up as one. Hence, the symbol bane does not appear on the skill dice in the custom dice set for the game. So this makes it fairly important that you either roll them separately or you have multiple colors of dice to determine, because you need to make sure that you know which ones are skill dice and which ones are immune from banes and which ones are not. Okay, gear dice. If you push your roll, you must also push any weapon dice or gear dice. So now that we're saying that even on a success, you can't just say take a success and just try to re-roll your base dice or your attribute dice. You have to roll your gear dice as well, or weapon dice. I mean, weapon dice is really gear dice. I'm curious as to why they differentiate them. Only once. You can only push your roll once. If you don't succeed on your second try, you just have to deal with the consequences. All right, so you can't then keep pushing and pushing and pushing. One time only. One push only. Pour a little out for Sean Connery. Rest in peace. Bane is activated. When you push yourself hard, there is a risk that you will suffer damage or exhaustion or that your weapon will be destroyed. After you have pushed your roll, look at all the dice on the table. In the first roll, Bane has no effect. When you push, they become active. Doesn't matter if the Bane came up on the first roll or the second. All right. Well, that's an interesting wrinkle. So I guess if you're going to push, you definitely want to re-roll. I think you can re-roll the dice that came up Bane the first time. I'm not sure. Hold on a minute. I think I got to backtrack for a second. Okay. All right. So that was a little thing that I must have read. Excuse me, but missed. So when you are pushing your dice, you have to keep any ones and sixes. So if you rolled a bunch of ones on your first roll, you probably want to be very careful with pushing it because all those Banes will then become activated. You don't get to re-roll those. Okay, that was something I didn't quite catch. For every Bane you have rolled on a base die when you push, you suffer 1 point of damage to the attribute you have used. That's interesting. We will read more about damage in Chapter 5. And just a quick from the chat. Raid LC. Sorry, I don't know if I'm not getting your name right. Do you plan on playing or running this rule set? I like the black and white illustration style. I don't know. So I often read a bunch of rule sets that I'll never get around to playing. But I might if I feel like if it's intriguing me, maybe I would run it as a one shot, see how it played, because it is intriguing. I like how they're doing some of it. I agree with you. I also like the black and white illustration style. I think it's very, very well done. I like the way the skills are working right now with the Banes and the pushing it. I feel like I would add that push mechanic to the game I'm running, which already kind of has a skill, not a skill die, but basically a dice pool, a custom kind of dice pool mechanic that I threw into BX, and I could see adding this absolutely into it. So it's interesting. So yeah, I might. Someone asked me that before, I think, on the other video, and it's definitely intriguing me. The problem for me in doing anything is time is just so hard to get some. So what I already have allocated, it's hard to find more. But I could definitely see about running this as a one shot, and I definitely would if I had the chance and opportunity. I absolutely would put it on my short list so far. Okay, for every Bane you have rolled on a weapon die when you push, your weapon's bonus is decreased by 1. We can read more about that below. Okay, we got to remember, ones on the skill dice never count as Banes. Describe your action. Little box text. You create a story together in Forbidden Lands. A dice roll is a dramatic peak. First, you should describe what you are trying to achieve so that everyone knows what is at stake. Then you roll your dice, interpret the result, and describe what happens. Describe what you do, what you say, or what you are thinking. If you push your roll, describe how. Do it yourself. Don't wait for the GM. The GM should only stop you if you go beyond the results you have rolled. So this is kind of an interesting wrinkle. I feel like it's a little bit different than what I usually think about. But again, I play mostly, D&D kind of OSR skills where I would say your thing, and then I'll figure out the role. Because this is seeming to be that you're going to describe your action more in terms of knowing if it's succeeded or failed, right? So I guess if I'm understanding this correctly, if I was to be wanting to do a diplomacy type of action, and we determined this was going to be a skill roll, instead of giving my speech and then the GM, if it's me or somebody else, might go, all right, I like what you're saying, but let's see if he likes it. Roll. Here, he might say, well, I want to do something diplomatic, and then we roll. I fail, so then I narrate. Perhaps I myself would narrate how my appeal for a common threat totally falls flat, right? Or I say the wrong thing, or I bring up something, and I would narrate that as opposed to me giving my speech, then making the roll, and then the GM saying, well, how the speech I gave just hit the wrong notes. So it's just a little bit of a different way of doing it. It does fit in with the kind of fiction sharing style that they have here. Oh, here we go. So I was curious. I was saying I could go to any dice and figure out what the chances of success are, but they have them here for us. So 3 dice gives you about a 42% chance to succeed. So, okay, so 3 to 4 seems like the big jump. You go from basically under 50% chance of success to over 50% chance of success. So that seems like a good. I guess I would keep that in mind. With if I could get to 4 dice, I would feel pretty good. And it seems like that would be pretty doable if I have a little bit of attributes, a little bit of skill, a little bit of gear. It seems like that's pretty doable. Here we go. Willpower. To push yourself to the brink of your abilities is risky, but it can also have positive effects. It gives you the force of will required to use the powerful kin talents and profession talents. We will read more about these in Chapter 4. For every Bane you roll on the base dice, weapon dice do not count. When you push, you get a willpower point. In addition to any damage you suffer, the willpower points are required to use your powerful kin talents and profession talents. You can gain additional willpower points from your stronghold, which is later. Mark your willpower points on your character sheet. You can never have more than 10 willpower points at a time. All right, so we get 10 max. And I'm guessing that we can only get willpower points if we push. I'm assuming because we don't get any, no pain, no gain, right? If we didn't take damage or we didn't get some kind of negative consequence from those Bane dice, we cannot then flip those Bane dice into willpower points, and it can only come from your attributes. The dice you're rolling with attributes, not your weapons, not your gear. So there's a little bit of a, little mechanical dance here, right? So that you want to give a certain amount of rolls. We don't roll too much because rolls are supposed to mean that something important is happening. And it also means that you have this opportunity to push and then gain willpower points, which then activates your skills. But if you're doing that too often, you're just going to be flush with skills all the time, which we don't want from a good narrative, dramatic game tension. So we have to kind of, as the GM, we got to kind of balance out, how many of those we're giving out and the circumstances. The game master can push rolls for NPCs, but she never gains willpower points. Okay. Here's an example. Josie rolls her 3 base dice for Nermena's jump. This is from the earlier example when she's trying to jump across a chasm to escape a ghoul. Nermena throws herself across the chasm, but midway realizes that it's too far to the other side. Josie decides to push the roll. She rolls her 2 base dice that didn't show Bane. One of them now comes up with a success. Nermena stretches out her hand and just barely catches the edge on the other side of the chasm. Panting, she climbs up, temporarily safe. Because of the Bane rolled, she suffers 1 point of damage to agility. She also gains 1 willpower point. So there we go. So it's a good, we want, as characters, right, we want those willpower dice, but of course doing that means we're taking damage and we're getting hurt, and I guess it has to be taking damage to our attributes because it's only those that count for willpower, not if you break your gear or swords. Only 1 chance. As a rule, you only have 1 chance to succeed with any action. Once you have rolled the dice and pushed the roll, you may not roll again to achieve the same goal. I like that. I'm just going to tell you right now, I like that. It's right there in the rules. You cannot spam trying to do something. But that does put very much importance as a GM on that failing forward. So you're not going to let them sit there and work on that door and try to lock it, pick it open 8 times or bang it down 7 times. Then you have to make sure that whatever you're doing for the failure doesn't leave that door in place, if that's the only way through. You got to get through there. You have to put them forward because they're here. They were saying in the rules, it is baked in. You get 1 chance, or at least every character gets 1 chance. Of course, this rule does not apply to combat. You can attack the same enemy over and over until he is sprawled bloody on the ground, or until your character is sprawled bloody on the ground. Okay, group rolls. When you face a challenge with your fellow adventurers, you don't roll dice separately. Instead, you choose who among you is best suited to take on this challenge. You decide who this is. The others may help them if it's relevant to the situation. If the roll fails, it counts as a failure for all of you. You are not allowed to try 1 time each. This rule does not apply to combat. Okay, right. So, you're going to pick the best person, and they're going to roll the dice. Whoever's got the best stuff. I don't know. I mean, that's fine. Part of me, not that I necessarily want everybody to roll dice all the time, but you can end up in that tyranny of the person who's good at something who does then does it all the time. I mean, granted, in this case, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're narrating the whole thing. It could just mean that they're just rolling dice. But it puts them in that. I feel like you find a lot in 5th edition, like, oh, the charisma guy, and so whenever there's a social encounter, it's always charisma guy. So charisma guy has has or charisma gal has a higher level of importance. It feels like they're getting spotlit a lot because they have highest charisma. And I guess there's the potential for that here, but that's something we can work around or figure out. Modifications. Sometimes external factors help you to succeed. This gives you extra skill dice to roll. Other times something hampers your action. This gives you fewer skill dice to roll than normal. This is called modification. All right, so what kind of mods do we have? The +1 means you roll 1 extra skill die. +2 means you roll 2 extra skill dice, and so on. Okay. -1 means you roll 1 skill die fewer. -2, 2 fewer. All right. Okay, you can only modify skill dice, never base dice or gear dice. Several modifications can apply to the same roll. Add them together. Right? If you have a mod of +2 and a -1, it adds up to +1. Negative dice. If after modifications you end up with exactly 0 skill dice, you just roll your base dice and any applicable gear dice. If you go below 0, you must roll this negative number of skill dice. These dice are called negative dice. Any success on negative dice eliminate an equal success on base or gear dice. If you push your roll, you must re-roll negative skill dice too, except the ones showing success, of course. You can get modifications in several different ways: through talents, through the difficulty of the action itself, and through help from others. Okay, so here's where we get into, since there are no, right, as I was saying before about the example with the chasm, we're not doing all the stuff to create a difficulty challenge difficulty rating like we might do in 5th edition or in the more modern D&D games. Instead, we're going to be doing these modifiers, and these modifiers won't affect your attributes. Those, you are strong as you are strong. And I mean, there are probably times when maybe this system you might think might not work. For, I don't know, example, if you'd been violently ill, you might think, okay, you're violently ill, so you're not as strong as you were, so I would like to put modifications on there to say, oh, you were weakened. But maybe we would just say, I suppose in this kind of system, you would have damage to that ability, which means you would roll less dice because of that. We're not going to modify the rolls. What we're modifying is skills. And, your equipment is your equipment, assuming it's in good order, and it seems like it can break and stuff like that. But you have lockpicks, you have lockpicks. And a complex lock would affect your skill to handle it, but not the efficacy of your lockpicks. Makes sense to me. Difficulty. Normally, the GM doesn't assess how difficult an action is. You only roll dice in challenging situations, period. But sometimes the GM might want to underscore that external factors either help or hinder an action. Use the following table for guidance. So we just have a bunch of these: trivial, simple, easy, average, demanding, hard, formidable. And again, they're kind of saying if it's trivial, simple, or easy, you should probably just think twice about making the rolls to begin with. You should just assume that your hardened adventurer can make a trivial test. But maybe there's a reason. Maybe you're doing a tournament, a gambling tournament, and so it's just part of the fun is going through it and just having them blow through the round, so you want to try it. But in the most part, we shouldn't do that. And if we want to really say, oh, this is a chasm that's super wide and really doesn't look good, you can, say, okay, it's going to be a little bit harder than normal. There are also cases when modifications are imposed by the rules, like when you aim carefully with a ranged weapon, shoot at long distance, or if you're in a bad bargaining position when you attempt to manipulate someone. Some talents also give you positive modifications in certain situations. There we go. Easy peasy. Oh, and one thing I like here is I like that you can basically just roll with it for the most part without having to mess with the stuff and just roll the dice and go and not have to figure out, which is something I like in the kind of BX style that I run where it's a lot of just roll under attributes. Most of the time I just flat roll. Oh, you have a great idea to make this kind of MacGyver-ish trap with your rope and your crossbow and whatever. Okay, just roll under your intelligence. You rolled on it, you got it, right? And I'm not worried in a lot of those about trying to figure out exactly how hard it is. Just roll it. And this kind of has that same vibe, which I appreciate. So that for the most part, just roll your dice and then keep it moving. Help from others. Other PCs or NPCs can help you succeed at a skill roll. This must be declared right away before you roll your dice. It must also make sense in the story. The individual helping you must be physically present and have the capacity to support your action. The GM has the final say. For each person helping you, you get a +1 modification. No more than 3 people can help you with a single roll, meaning your maximum modification from assistance is +3. In combat, helping counts as the same type of action as the one you are supporting, fast or slow. Okay, we haven't gotten to combat yet, so that sounds like something I think whatever of the Demon Lord. Shadow of the Demon Lord uses a fast and slow turns. NPCs can help each other in the same way as player characters. Letting NPCs act in groups instead of individually is often an easy way to manage large numbers of NPCs in conflicts. Good to know. Here we have another example with good old Nermena. Nermena tries to help her fellow adventurer, the dwarf Tyrgar, to climb up the old ruined tower. Tyrgar has agility 2 and skill level 2 and move. Thus, he gets to roll 2 base dice and 3 skill dice. Wait a minute. That was 2. Oh, okay. Sorry. Should have read the parenthetical first. He gets to roll 2 base dice, 3 skill dice, 2 from his skill, 1 from Nermena's help. He rolls 1 success and makes the climb. All right, so they're giving us opposed rolls. Sometimes rolling a success isn't enough to succeed with your skill roll. In some cases, you have to beat your foe in an opposed roll. To win an opposed roll, you have to roll successfully and roll more successes than your adversary. Every success your adversary rolls eliminates one of your successes. Only you, the attacker, can push your roll, and the opposed roll only counts as an action for you. Sometimes you and your adversary roll for different skills, sometimes the same. Opposed rolls are common when you manipulate or use stealth, and when someone uses those skills against you. The GM can also use opposed rolls when she deems it appropriate. Dodging and parrying in close combat are technically not opposed rolls, as they require an action by the defender and can be pushed. Okay, so we have a mechanic here, and I like it. I like the way that they're working together here. You can use different skills. All you're really doing is taking successes away from the other one. Then you can look at how many successes you have. They haven't said if you get to a certain point, if they go negative, but I guess it doesn't matter, right? So it'd be interesting if you had, let's say, 2 successes and 3 opposition successes. That turned into 1 bane for you, right? The difference in the defender 1, so that becomes a bane. They don't mention it, so I guess no. But I might look at that as something I might put in there if I was playing this. It just makes it a little bit more of a an oomph. But I guess you're gonna have banes anyway if you roll them yourself, so maybe it's not necessary. And of course, remember those banes potentially turn into those willpower dice, and we don't want to get too many willpower dice floating around, or willpower points. Example, moving through the old tower, Nermena spots another undead guard. She tries to sneak by it into the ancient library beyond. Nermena has current agility score of 2 and skill level 1 in stealth, and thus gets to roll 2 base dice and 1 skill die. The undead has wit 1 and skill level 2 in scout, and rolls 1 base die and 2 skill dice. Nermena rolls 1 success, but so does the guard. Nermena stumble, but Josie decides to push the roll. She gets lucky and rolls another success. She manages to stay silent and sneaks past the undead guard without being spotted. There you have it. I would like to see an example of a fail, just to see how they mean that to go, but I guess she would stumble, and then they see her, and that's it. Let's see. NPCs and skills, non-player characters use skills in the same way as player characters. GM rolls dice for them, and they can push their rolls just like PCs can, but the GM only has to roll for actions that affect the PC directly. For example, if the PC is attacking a player character or is attempting to save them. When an NPC performs an action that does not directly affect the PC, the GM can simply decide what happens. Makes sense. Okay. My nose is getting clogged. Gear. To increase your chance of success, you can use gear. Gear can take the form of a weapon in combat, a rope to climb, or an old book to understand a legend. You'll find many weapons in Chapter 5 and lists of other gear in Chapter 9. Useful gear gives you gear dice. This is called the gear bonus. When it comes to weapons, the terms commonly used are weapon dice and weapon bonus. You roll gear dice together with base dice and skill dice, and they are counted in the same way. 6s equal successes, which is what we've pretty much already heard, but just reiterating it. Gear gets worn. Here's a good one. I've always liked systems where gear can get worn down, but I always find them too clunky to want to keep track of. I know every once in a while on Reddit you'll see something, oh, I want swords to be broken, or I want this stuff, and it sounds really cool. And part of me is like, yeah, that would be neat if your sword breaks. But then I think in my aborted attempts to play Breath of the Wild, one of the things that drove me just nuts was my weapons and things breaking all the time. And it really ended up just making me more frustrated and annoyed and not wanting to do the things that I feel like the game wants me to do, which is explore. Because if I'm exploring and I'm having fun attacking those little creatures and those outposts, but my stuff is constantly breaking, it just, it just made me want to quit. And I feel the same thing as role playing games, where it sounds cool that your weapons break. That should be a out of the ordinary kind of thing, and oftentimes, it ends up being something that the odds are good that you're going to break weapons and things fairly often, which shouldn't be the case, right? So I'm curious to see what they do, because I do like it in the concept in theory, if it's an interesting and elegant system. When you use gear and push your roll, there's a risk your gear may be damaged. For every bane you roll with your gear dice when pushing the roll, the item's gear bonus is decreased by 1. It simply doesn't work as well anymore. A weapon dulls, a rope frays, the fragile pages of a book fall out and crumble to pieces. If the gear bonus reaches 0, the item is broken and cannot be used again until repaired. Luckily, damaged gear can be repaired. It takes a few hours of work and a successful roll with the crafting skill. Excuse me. If the roll is successful, the gear bonus is recovered by 1 point for every success up to the starting value. If the roll fails, the gear bonus is permanently decreased to its current score. If the gear bonus has been reduced to 0 and the attempt at repair fails, the item is permanently destroyed. Advanced items require special talents to repair. All right, so I think this is a fairly good system, because basically, to put it in terms, right? You have a sword that has a rating of 4. Gets damaged, goes down to 3, goes down to 2, goes down to 1, and you can just kind of keep up with that in your character sheet. Granted, it is a little extra accounting, but I'm never really just outwardly against doing a little accounting. And at any time there, you could try to repair it, but if you fail, that sword is just permanently damaged, and if it gets too far, then it's just gone. The interesting one there is books and things, right? Because those lore pieces, potentially spell books, get damaged, and then you could get destroyed, which would be that would be a painful thing as a character to lose that book, but that's a risk, and I like it. So yes, I like it, and I could see using that some way. And again, this is something I feel like you could convert to other systems if you like it, right? Maybe in something like D&D, you have a sword does D8, but it's damaged, so it goes down to D6, then goes down to D4. If it goes past D4, then it breaks. Here's an example. To climb up to the next level of the tower, Nermena uses a rope. She thus gets to roll 2 base dice, current agility 2, and 1 gear die. The rope has +1 bonus. She has a bit of bad luck, fails the roll, and decides to push. She makes the roll, but one of the gear dice comes up a bane. The rope is scraped against a sharp rock and breaks off. Nermena takes a tumble. So, in that example, my problem is did she succeed? It seems like yes, she succeeded. Or no, maybe did she not succeed? She says she makes the roll, but she got that bane. So did she get up the tower and then tumble? Need to. Oh, from the chat, I was interested in the product and enjoyed following the live. Good job. See you next time. Thank you. I'm Lizion Cine, Distorias. Well, thank you. Sorry for butchering your name if I did. English is my native tongue, and other than a little bit of French, my only tongue. But thank you for the kind words. See you around. Glad you joined for as long as you could. All right, so this example, I would have liked to know, yes, it says she succeeded ultimately, but then she takes a tumble. So I don't know what that means. But obviously I do like the fact that she lost her rope, or at least the rope's cut in half or something. And this is where you can get into a little bit of a gray area with these kind of things, because I could see in a D&D game, oh, your rope breaks. Well, how much rope did I lose? Well, this is just your rope is destroyed, essentially. But then translating that back into fiction, what does it mean? Does it mean that you climbed up, but the rope broke way at the top, so you just have a little nub left? Can you not? But if you had 10 feet of rope, did you really lose the rope, or is it just now lesser, right? So that's something that this kind of, because they've abstracted it in this way, we do lose a little bit of that. Where I could see in the experiment game I'm running now, if their rope break, they would say like, great, well, that stinks that our rope broke, but how much rope do we have left? And what does that mean? In this case, it would just be like, well, the rope is worthless. It's unraveled, I guess. But that's a little bit of just a downside to this kind of system. Artifact dice. Usually, gear only add extra d6 to your roll. However, there are master-crafted artifacts and magic items that add an extra d8, d10, or even d12. Ooh. In addition to the normal gear dice, artifact dice are never degraded by wear. Rare items of this kind are described in the Game Master's Guide. Items that give you artifact dice to roll are divided into 3 categories depending on the type of dice they give. D8 is mighty, a D10 is epic, a D12 is legendary. When you roll an artifact die, any result of 6 or higher counts as a success. Really high results count as several successes, and we have a table. So this is cool. So on a D8, you're going to get results, successes on 6, 7, or 8, which is great. And then if you get an 8, you actually get 2 successes out of that. Then if you have a D10, you're going to get 2 successes on 8 or 9s, but then 3 successes on a 10. And then on a D12, you get 3 successes on 10 or 11 and 4 successes on a 12. So that's cool. So your odds of baning on those, I guess, are very low. It doesn't say you can't bane on those artifact dice. But obviously, instead of having a 1 in 6 chance of baning, if you have a legendary device, you chop that in half. There's my phone. No. And then you have a much better chance of successes, and then really ratcheting up the number of successes. So, cool. I'm just going to respond in chat. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we have pride. Once per session, you can use your pride when you have failed a skill roll. When you use your pride, roll a d12, add the result to your roll. You can activate your pride no matter whether you have pushed the roll or not, but you cannot push the roll after using your pride. If you fail despite using your pride, you must erase your pride, right? Pride was that characteristic that you would set as something of your character, and it could be something like, I'm always silent when I sneak. So then you try to sneak, you roll it up, you fail. You can use your pride because you've said, no, wait, I'm always silent when I sneak. I can't make noise or be uncovered. So then you roll again. But now if you fail that one, it's basically like that. You had this idea in your brain. I mean, the way I think of it is you had this idea in your brain, like in, I don't know, I think of like Any Given Sunday when I don't know how old that movie is now. Oliver Stone's football movie. The players, at least, I forget which one of them would kind of say things themselves, like, I'm the best wide receiver in the planet. I'm the best wide receiver in the planet. And that it was kind of them psyching themselves up to do something. So that's your mantra, right? I am the sneakiest sneak thief in the realm, so I cannot be unsneaked. Or I can always sneak. And then if you fail a roll sneaking, that belief is sort of challenged. If you succeed, then you succeed, and you still have this belief in yourself that you are the sneakiest sneak thief around. If you then put your pride on the line and you fail, it's like you've killed that image inside yourself. You can no longer think of yourself as the sneakiest sneak thief in the realm because clearly some little goblin or ghoul or something just spotted you, right? So it's kind of an interesting idea. And then if you lose your pride, if I'm remembering correctly, you basically go one session where you have no pride, and then the session after that you could pick a new one. It doesn't say whether you could pick the same one again, but as a GM, I would say no, you have to pick something else. Maybe you could come back to that one at a later time, but no, you can't just go 1 week not being the sneakiest sneak thief in the world and then come back to it. You'd have to pick something else. That's my personal that's my personal ruling on that. But it was an interesting idea to give you another method, right? So you can push, and you can have user pride. You can use your pride when you push, but if you use your pride, you cannot then push. So you have some options. Okay, so I'm not going to go into a ton of these skills. I'm just going to kind of rattle through them because I feel like they're mostly self-explanatory. If I get to one, and they're only 16, that seems like I feel like it needs more explanation, I will read it. If you're following along in the chat and there's one that you absolutely want me to read, then I will. But otherwise, I'm just going to kind of give it a capsule. So we have might, endurance, melee. I will read crafting. We have crafting. You often have to make your own gear in the Forbidden Lands and repair it if it breaks. To do so requires the crafting skill. Repairing a broken item generally takes a few hours and a successful crafting roll. If the roll succeeds, the item is repaired. If the item has a gear bonus, it will increase one step for every success rolled. You cannot go above the original gear bonus. If the roll fails, the gear bonus is permanently decreased to the current level. If the gear bonus has been decreased to 0 and the repair fails, the item is permanently destroyed. Advanced items require specific talents to repair. And we have some boxed text. Simple and advanced items. All items in the game fall into one of two categories: simple and advanced. Simple items are items anyone can make and repair with the crafting skill, while advanced items require specific talents to make or repair. Every item in the gear list in Chapter 9 is categorized, and the talent is required for advanced items and the talent required for advanced items is listed for each item. Okay, so basically, if it's simple, anyone can repair it. If it's advanced, you need some extra skills. Okay, so first we have, as part of the crafting skill, we can repair. So now we can also craft. We can create new items. It requires far more work than repairing existing ones. It requires a crafting roll and the right talent for advanced items, just like repairing, but you also need raw material, in most cases special tools, and usually a lot more time. Some items are very complicated to craft, and the roll will be modified negatively. All these requirements and prerequisites can be found in the gear tables in Chapter 9. Note that some raw materials might be items which in turn must be crafted. So you might have to do compound crafting, right? If you're building a wagon, you might have to build the wheels, you got to build the chassis, you got to build the wagon part, whatever the I don't know, what do you call the part of the wagon where you stick everything? The trunk, I don't know. Whatever, you get the idea. You got to build all the bits of the wagon and then put it together to make the wagon, right? So you might have 3 or 4 or 5 different crafting rolls to get to the finished product, which is a wagon. If your roll is successful, you make the item of the same quality as listed in the equipment list. If you fail, the item is unusable. The raw materials are spent, and you must increase your crafting skill or wait a week before you can attempt to craft the same item again. Some box text on raw materials. Raw materials are divided into categories and are counted in units. For example, a unit of iron or a unit of cloth. You can find raw materials in the gear list in Chapter 9. All right. Additional time. By spending more time than the minimum required to craft an item, you increase your chance of success. If you spend twice as much time as the requirement, you get a +1. If you spend 4 times as much time, you get a +2. You cannot get a higher modification than +2. Master crafting. Skilled craftsmen can create items above and beyond what a normal craftsman can. Using talents, you can create items with better game stats than normal. Read more in Chapter 4. New items. You can attempt to craft items that are not listed in the weapons and gear list. You can determine the item's properties and the requirements to craft it in consultation with the GM. The GM has the final word. All right, so that's cool. So we got some stuff on crafting. So we got stealth, we got move, sleight of hand, marksmanship, scouting. So I'll just read the box text. This is interesting. Don't use scouting to find hidden things. The scouting skill is not used to find hidden things like secret doors or hidden clues. If you describe how your PC searches the right place, the GM should simply let you discover what you are looking for if it is possible to find. So this is an interesting thing, and I'm glad I read it, because it brings up a bit of some insight into how they want you to play the game, and also something to be aware of, I guess, if I was a GM running it. It's very hard. You really have to keep on players to get them out of the, I searched the room, right? It's very easy for them to say it. It doesn't require any much thought on it. You enter a room, it's 10 by 10. They're so, okay, I searched the room. Whenever players say to me, I searched the room, the first thing I'm asking them is, well, what are you searching? How are you searching? and how much time are you taking to do it? And the answers could be, I just want to do this, and I really try to get into the details, because yes, I'm happy and fine to say, hey, there's a secret door in the south wall, and if they're going to find it. But at the same time, I want more effort than I search the room, right? Because it's easy to search every room. And now you can have time as a factor that might limit that. Okay, I searched the room. All right, well, if you're really going to search the room like that, it's going to take you an hour or 2 hours. And then you go, well, we don't have 2 hours to spend. Okay, so if we want to search the room, we have to be a little bit more specific, because we don't have time to go floor to ceiling all across this whole room and spend 2 hours doing it. Only going to be, again, getting that detail on the methodology. Well, what are you doing? I'm feeling along the walls or doing this or that. Okay, well, that makes sense. If you do that and you do that along all the walls, that when you get to that south wall, you will see the trap. Or some other method, you're taking a candle and you're walking it along the wall, seeing if you see a little draft or anything that would make the candle light flicker. Great. Another one, I would give that away. So, you just really want to be, particularly if you're using this where the game is saying, hey, if they ask for it and it's there, just give it to them, because we're not making it a challenge to find them. The challenge is more, that they're doing it in the right place, right? That they enter a room that has a secret door and they search, do that. But for me, I would want to make sure that and hopefully in this kind of system where you're sharing the fiction and you're really more into doing that your players would be in the habit and get in that mode of describing how they are doing things and doing it in a more fictional sense, and just saying, I searched the room. But it's something to at least be aware of. And this really goes for any game, because players will fall into the easiest thing if it works. And if you just say, I searched the room, and then, okay, the traps are here and the secret treasure chest is over here and this is over here, then that's what they're going to do. If you require them to do more, hopefully over time they just get in that mode and you don't have to ask for it anymore. They will just give it to you. We have lore, survival, insight. Let's see. I'm a little bit curious on insight. Okay, you use basically insight when someone's trying to manipulate you. It's basically the counter to manipulate. And you can also try to determine an NPC's state of mind. You must be close to the NPC and spend a few minutes observing them. If you roll successful, the GM must tell you which is the NPC's strongest emotion right now. For example, hate, fear, contempt, love. All right. Insight's one of those skills that, in D&D and things I'm kind of, I'm iffy on. But I don't feel like this is a bad way to describe it. Manipulation. Hey, there's a good one. Hey, manipulation is not mind control. It's right there. Don't have to be, I threw a little intimidation. Now I'm ruler of the world. No, not mind control. Let's see what they say about it specifically. When you manipulate someone, you do not take control of their mind. What you are trying to convince your adversary about must be somewhat reasonable, otherwise the GM can disallow it. Yes. Can't go to the king and say, I manipulate them into giving me their kingdom. No, they're never going to do that. Never. Never, ever. Let's see. NPCs and other PCs can manipulate you. If their role succeeds, you must attack or offer a deal of some kind. What does that mean? I guess let me go back and read the because I like that box text, but I feel like there's a little bit more here I want to see. Let's see. All right, we're gonna make an opposed roll manipulation versus insight. Your chances are affected by both your bargaining position and your reputation. Wow. Okay. If you succeed, your adversary must either do what you want or immediately attack you physically. Well, that's interesting. So there's a little bit of a risk there, right? If you go to manipulate the wrong being or creature, even if you succeed, they just might attack you, which is interesting because I'm trying to think how this would work in a game, but it definitely would be I imagine this is a bit of a control on asking for something ridiculous, besides the fact that GM could just go, no, they're not doing it. But if you imagine you've boxed somebody in with their options, right? You've convinced them they have no option but to help you. There are some situations where somebody will just turn and they just can't bring themselves to do what you ask, but you haven't given them, you've convince them there's no other way. And so what do? They might just try to attack you because there's no other way. And so you have made yourself this obstacle to them, and because you will not be denied, so to speak, that they just have to do it. So that's an interesting kind of control, and I would like that in a D&D kind of game. Oh yeah, you can try to go ahead and intimidate the heck out of them, but even if you succeed, whatever you're doing might just push them to attack you instead. So now, but here's the thing that I'm a little bit iffy on. NPCs and other PCs can manipulate you, and if they do successfully, you have to either attack them or offer a deal of some kind. And they do say, hey, even if they agree with you, it doesn't mean you get it for free, which is another nice point. You've gone to the Bobby the Thug, and you've put him up against the alley wall, and you punch him in the gut once or twice, and you say, you're going to give me that name that I'm asking for. He might just attack you, but even if he says fine, he still has the leverage to say, well, what are you doing for me? He doesn't have to just give it to you for nothing. You're able to get to the point where it's on the table, but you may still have to make a deal. And it's got to be reasonable. Obviously, he can't ask for all your magical gear or stuff, but you might still have to make some kind of bargain, which I like. Now, the part that I'm a little bit iffy on is I'm always loath to have PCs using skills against each other, because it can be kind of cheap, particularly if someone's got low stats and somebody has high, right? If you're, what's that other skill that I'm spacing on? Whoops. Your insight is low and somebody else has maxed out their manipulation. Suddenly they're manipulating you all over the place. And then your recourse is either to make a deal and kind of do what they want or attack them. There seems to be some things here which kind of give this, they subtly encouraging inter-party conflict and potential melees and combat between characters, which not usually what I'm looking for, but it's interesting. All right, so you've got healing. I'm not going to go through healing, but we got lore, survival. Oh, whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, healing, performance. Oh, you can taunt enemies. That's cool. You can distract them if you're successful. And then you can keep modifying their rolls downward if you get lots of successes, which is cool. Animal handling. All right, so here they're kind of breaking this up, and it does. Okay, so I was interested in animal handling simply because in D&D, animal handling does not have, I believe, by the books, any kind of ability to tame animals, but it is often broken out as, oh yeah, you make these animal handling rolls, and now you've tamed and you have a wyvern or a dragon for a pet. Whereas I believe the skill doesn't say anything like that. The skill is really more about your horse is going wild or freaking out, or maybe you want to calm a dog. Something like that's what it's for. But here at least they bake it in there. Okay, you want to tame wild animals? Here we have it. You can make some opposed rolls. And you have to spend time every day taming the animal. That's nice. Or you have to start over. So that's good. It's not one roll and suddenly, oh, the wyvern is mine. No, you got to keep working at it. Please note that you cannot tame monsters, only animals. All right, that's another key point. So I guess you can't have that wyvern. It is not for you. And that's an interesting element. And I feel like people don't take advantage of as GMs. I mean, it's one of those weird things, right? Because we want to encourage players and to do these things with their characters, but at the same time, you get in these situations, which I read about all the time, characters picking up every monster egg and everything they can find to try to tame them, to kind of come up with pets. And and people usually run, oh, you can imprint on it and everything, but a lot of animals really can't be tamed. And I think it was in that book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, where I was first exposed to the fact that a lot of animals can't be tamed, at least not on a mass level, and it's just not part of their DNA, which is why you don't see, zebras used in places of horses in Africa. Sure, there might be the odd zebra that's tamed, but you don't see it done a lot because they just simply, it doesn't work. They're not, cannot be domesticated in that way. So I'm totally fine with saying, hey, look, these monsters just can't be tamed. It's just not part of their DNA. But I'm also fine if you want to be, the PCs are already exceptional. So if you want to say, okay, you can try it, but it just can't normally work, which is also interesting. But we want to find that line between it's interesting and it's fun and adds to the game with it just becoming something that gets abused, and like your characters are trying to become, I don't know, zookeepers by just getting one of every animal, like Moses, to try to tame them all. So here we're going to get into talents. Breedemon, The minstrel sang through broken teeth and lips to please his captors in a voice much too large for his scrawny body. Not until blood poured from the ears of the warriors and giant Handra fell from her bench did the horseman realize what was going on. By then, it was already too late. Bum, 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 bum. All right, so we get some talents to start the game, which we went over a little bit in part 1. So if you're interested in hearing about the talents that you can pick up with your kin, right, which is your race species, they call it kin, which I dig. I dig it, using kin as the word for that term. So we have kin talents, profession talents, and general talents. Kin and professional talents are more powerful than general talents, but they require that you spend those willpower points, which we talked about earlier. And you get those by pushing your dice rolls when you are testing skills, or just making, not just skills, but you're making die rolls to accomplish stuff. Here we have the list of talents. I'm not going to read through them. Some of them, again, are tied to what your kin is, right? Human, elf, half-elf, etc. Then we have the ones that are tied to your professions. We have, druid, hunter, peddler, etc. Then we have some general ones, which include berserking and a bowyer for making bows, and axe fighter, cold-blooded, dragon slayer. Does that include fletching? There's fletching in there separately. Maybe they just combine bows and arrow making. Okay, you're going to get ranks in your talents. 3 ranks. Talents generally come in 3 ranks. Every talent describes what the various ranks mean and what benefits they provide. When you increase the rank of a talent, and you retain the effects of the lower ranks as well. The ranks of a profession talent have separate effects. You can only spend willpower points on one effect at a time. For example, a hunter with rank 3 in Path of the Arrow can either ignore armor or increase damage, not both in the same attack. It's cool. It is allowed to combine the effects of different talents in a single action. If you have rank 3 in both Dragon Slayer and Sword Fighter, you can add 2d8 to attack with a sword against a monster. Is that any monster or against just dragons? Develop talents. During the game, you'll gain XP, which you can use to increase the rank of your talents, as well as learn new talents. See page 39, which we're well past. All right. I don't know how many I'm going to read, just because there's a bunch. I don't necessarily feel like we need to go through all of them. Let's look at adaptive. This is the human talent. Humans are new to the Forbidden Lands and are seen as intruders by the other kin, but no other kin can adapt to new situations and living conditions the way humans can. If you spend a willpower point when you're about to roll for a skill, you can roll for any skill of your choice to achieve the same result. You must be able to motivate how you use the chosen skill. GM has final say, but should give you some leeway. Okay, so this is kind of like a MacGyverish skill, which kind of makes sense from the way that humans are usually treated in fantasy games these days, right? In 5th edition, humans have that feat, which is that same sort of adaptability. They can just choose, or you're playing, the alternate human. And this is kind of similar. So it's interesting, right? So you don't have, maybe you say, well, I want to manipulate someone. I don't have a manipulate skill, but I have a lot of insight. And I could make the argument that same kind of empathy that allows me to be really in tune with these things would then allow me to manipulate it. Oh, by the way, and here's this one willpower point that then allows me to activate and make that skill switcheroo. Elves have inner peace. They can enter a deep meditation, which allows them to heal all damage, and they basically spend a quarter day in a kind of meditative rest. Half-elves get psychic power, and it basically allows them to spend what they get more bang for their buck spending willpower points. So if you spend more than every time you spend 1 or more willpower points to activate a talent or cast a spell, the first willpower point counts as 2. If you spend 2 willpower points, it counts as 3, and so on. Note this also increases the risk of magic mishaps, which we don't know about yet, right? So you basically get 1 extra skill point. Cool. Willpower point. Assuming you spend 1. You have to spend 1, but if you spend 1, you get 2. True Grit. What dwarves get. Halflings get hard to catch. Wolfkin get hunting instincts. Orcs get unbreakable. When you are broken by any kind of damage, you can spend a willpower point to immediately get back on your feet. Well, this is basically just like I forget the name of the orc skill in orc trait in 5th edition, or is it half orcs that have it? It might be half orcs, but it's basically the same thing. Goblins get nocturnal. Something, obviously they're good in the dark. It's for stealth. Stealth in the dark or dimly lit environments, they can spend willpower points, which automatically become extra successes. Nice. And you can even do that after you roll. So that's cool. Druids get paths of healing, paths of shifting shapes. Are these choices? Can you have more than one path? What does it say? As a druid, you can learn the following 3 profession talents. The druid's talents are all about magic and determine which spells you can cast. Okay, so I guess you can have all 3. There's the path of healing things. There's the path of shape-shifting. That's kind of your standard druid-ish shape-shifting stuff, or at least in terms of role-playing games, or at least D&D style fantasy role-playing games. Path of sight. You could see beyond sight. What is that? Was that Lino, Lord of the Rings? Lino and Thundercats. Give me sight beyond sight. The Eye of Thundera. Inner eye. See what happens. What will happen? Cool. Fighters get some talents. Let's see. Okay. Checking in to see if the fam has. So I'm always streaming when the rest of my family's out. Sometimes they will message me when they're on their way back, so I know that I need to wrap it up. Sometimes they're stealthy, and I fail my scouting rolls. Okay, Path of the Blade, right? So fighters get weapon-based paths. Ooh, I like this. Path of the Enemy. You see through your opponent. You are transparent. And anticipate his next move before it happens. So that's cool. So you can work that way. A Path of the Shield if you want to be more of a defender type. I like that. Hunters get Path of the Arrow. Path of the Beast. These are basically your kind of rangery things, right? You have the sort of archer ranger type, and then you have the beastmaster type. And I guess you can have both, some combination. You can put your ranks where you will. And then a Path of the Forest, right? Working on Survivor. Minstrel, Path of the Hymn. Seems like they're positive support songs. Path of the Song, which is more, looks like kind of a Pied Piperish type of path. Maybe more if we're doing somewhat offensive, but in a manipulation kind of way. Path of the War Cry, combat. Peddler is kind of interesting because it's maybe the one class or the profession that's kind of different than your standards, right? So you're kind of what's a peddler doing? Delving in dungeons. Path of Gold. So you're good at bargaining. Path of Lies. You're obviously good at lying. Path of Many Things. Maybe you're kind of a MacGyver type. What's in the bag? Egg. All kinds of stuff. The Rider. Path of the Companion. You got some kind of bond with your horse or other sort of animal. Path of the Night. If you want to be a mounted combat kind of thing. Path of the Plains. You're great at moving around. We have Rogues, Path of the Face. You're like Face from the A-Team. Path of the Killer. All right, so you're good at stabby. Path of Poison. Oh, that's interesting. I guess they're somewhat embracing poison in the games. Most games, I don't say most, D&D, right, usually does not embrace using poisons. This one, there's a path that does, I guess. And let's say that opens up lots of cans of worms. Because if you're poisoning people, people can poison you. And there's so many more opportunities for people to poison you. I mean, your average game, you're in taverns, you're drinking a lot, you're eating a lot, all this stuff. There's so many options for somebody to come in and poison you. Whereas you as a player don't have that many opportunities. Because for you to poison somebody in a tavern, that requires a lot of getting around or greasing palms or doing stuff to do. And if you're allowing players to do it, does it make sense that NPCs wouldn't do it? And then how do you balance that? I kind of usually like to leave poison sort of out of it for the most part, but I don't mind that it's in it. It's definitely says something about the type of game that you're running. If people are using poisons a lot, and then as opposed to just stabbing people. Sorcerers, the path of blood, the path of death, path of signs, the path of stones. These are all different spells, death magic, stone songs, symbolism. We have some general talents: ambidextrous, axe fighter. I'm kind of curious about axe fighter. Nothing splits a shield or skull like a mighty axe. So I guess okay. So if you want to fight with an axe instead of a sword, I guess go for it. Take that talent. You can become a berserker when you're broken, which I'm assuming by broken means you're down. You go down to 0 and something. You can choose to unleash a primal rage. Or if you're a bowyer, as a bower, I think it's bower, right? I think it's really bower, not bowyer. You have learned how to turn wood and leather into lethal bows and slings. So I guess that doesn't include arrows. Oh, but they don't use. Well, I guess they're using what do you call it? They're using. They're not. You're not counting individual arrows. You're using dice, the usage dice basically for arrows. So maybe that's why it's not included. But I wouldn't mind having the skill either allow you to make arrows, or maybe they're assuming you could craft them along with the bow. I don't know. I didn't see Fletcher in the list, but I suppose I could add it if I so chose. You don't need weapons, so you can be a brawler, a builder. That's you're basically an engineer. You're a chef. You're cold-blooded. You're callous, and you can kill defenseless enemies without a second's hesitation. You're a defender. You're a dragon slayer. Dragon slayer is a title given to those who seek honor and fame by killing beasts and monsters. Okay, so you don't have to kill dragons, and you don't have to just be about dragons. Executioner, fast footwork, fast shooter, fearless, firm grip, fisher, hammer fighter. Hammer fighter! It's like Mario. Well, at least in Donkey Kong, Mario would have been a skilled hammer fighter. Then he gave it up. He gave it up, chase princesses, and throw things. Spitfire. He gave up his hammer for the ability to sometimes spit fire. Herbalist. Let's see. Horseback fighter. Wait, is Mario in Donkey Kong? I don't know. Did I just goof that up? Somebody in Donkey Kong, a guy. I thought it was Mario, but maybe it wasn't. Had that hammer. Hammering things. Been a while since I've looked at the lore of Donkey Kong, so please forgive my trespasses. Horseback fighter, incorruptible. Oops. What did I do? Knife fighter, lightning fast, lucky, master of the hunt, lock picker. Melee charge, pack rat, pain resistant, pathfinder, poisoner, quartermaster, quick draw, sailor, sharp tongue, shield fighter, sixth sense, smith, spear fighter, steady feet, sword fighter, tailor, tanner, threatening, throwing arm, wanderer. There you go. All right, so those are all those. So you can see, just again, I just rattled through the list, went down, but obviously you could see how you could have your kin talents and your profession talents and those general talents, and you can obviously find the synergies if you wanted to be focused on being a defensive shield fighter, and then Ovaltine Patrol. Pretty sure that's Mario, but the lady is not Princess Peach. Thinks she's named Pauline. No idea if she still features in the Mario games. Thanks. I was pretty sure it was Mario, but I couldn't. Thanks for the confirmation. I was pretty sure it was Mario, but sometimes they just change it up. So anyway, you can see how you can find synergies between skills or your talents of different types. If you want to be a real defensive fighter, you can also take shield fighter, double it up, or obviously spread them out to be more versatile. All right, combat and damage. Let's see, I'm coming up at an hour 20. Let's see how much further I can get before life intrudes. What's in a name? Mormallon asks while wiping blood from his blade on a silk handkerchief. That which we call a heart, by any word would bleed as rich. Rubenwald was in no shape to respond, clutching his bleeding chest, but his left hand reached for his grandmother's magical dagger, hidden in his boot. I'm not sure what that's to mean. Does that mean that Rubenwald is going to try to kill Mormallon? One last thrust, see if he can surprise him. Life as an adventurer is hard and often violent. You can run into wild beasts, malicious raiders, cold-souled rust brothers, and demonic monsters. I still want to know what exactly a rust brother is. When someone gets in your way, sometimes you have no choice but to hack your way through them. Combat can be rough for your player character and can even be lethal. Before you enter combat, you should always ask yourself, is it worth it? That's always good advice, particularly if you're playing old school games. Before you just jump into combat, ask yourself, is it worth it? Is there not another way I can do this? As especially at low levels, you do not have a lot of room, um, you know, for second guessing once you're in it. Okay, so we got rounds and initiative. We're gonna grab 10 cards. Okay, so using playing cards here, numbered 1 through 10. All the players taking part in the conflict, either voluntary or involuntary, each draws a card, and the GM draws 1 card for every NPC. This is called drawing the initiative. The number on the card determines the order in which you act in the conflict. Low numbers go first. Number 1 acts first, number 2, and so on. Place your initiative card by your character sheet so everyone can see in which order you all act. The GM puts her initiative cards in front of her. All right. So there you go. I always thought one interesting thing with these systems would be is what if you had your hand of cards? Because I've thought about this. You have a hand of cards 1 through 10, or maybe a little bit less. Because I feel like 10, if you get through. So the idea here would be that you could pick which initiative cards you can use, but you can only use each one once until you've used them all. So if you want to use that one and go first, maybe 10 works well. You want to use that one and go first, you can. You're going to have a good shot of going first, but then that one is off the table until you get to say past 10 rounds, which I would hope your combat wouldn't last 10 rounds unless it's something super epic. So then at some point you might have to use those really low cards and just eat being at the end of the rounds, right? And maybe, or alternatively, you say, I'm going to start at the end of the rounds because I'm way in the back, or I really want to wait for what's going to happen, and I'll save those for when we really need it. So the cleric, or I guess it's the druid, it needs to heal somebody. They're going to want to maybe save that one card for when they might really need to get on somebody and heal them before they die. And so they're working in the back of the rounds because maybe they're in the back and they're casting spells or doing whatever. So interesting. But the idea of using cards is cool. Obviously, in these days, when you potentially are playing on Discord or on Roll20 or another virtual tabletop, it may take a little more setting up, but you could obviously easily convert this to rolling a d10. It's the same thing, assuming you're doing it randomly and shuffling each time. So, but I like the fact that you can kind of lay them out. So you can, if you were playing around the table, you could, have something to see what your initiative is. When all participants in the combat have acted once, the round is over. A new round begins. But you're only doing initiative once. Okay, so that puts my idea a little bit further afield, but I still like it. I still like my idea. Surprise. If you perform an attack that the GM deems surprising, you may draw 2 initiative cards and choose which one of the 2 you want. The card you do not choose is put back in the deck, which is shuffled again before the others draw their cards. All right, that's interesting, right? That's an interesting way of doing surprise. I kind of like it. I don't think it can be abused too much. All right, so they have custom card deck for Forbidden Lands if you want it. A round is any period from 10 seconds to a minute, depending on the circumstances and skills used. A turn is about 15 minutes and is used primarily when exploring adventuring sites. So that's similar to old school D&D, which I think was 10 minutes was a adventuring exploration turn. Okay, some talents can do that. You can never draw a new initiative card, but you can exchange your initiative with another player. That's cool. I like that too. So you can, as a party, do some swappy swap. Is there a cost? Oh, I like this idea. You can exchange initiative cards with an enemy through the feint action. It's cool too. Let's see. Here we have an example. On their way from the old ruined castle, a few cheap gems and old books being all they have to show for it, Nermena the half-elf and Tyrgar the dwarf are spotted by 3 orcs at the edge of the forest. They grin and get ready for a fight. All 5 draw an initiative card each. Nermena draws 6, Tyrgar 4, and the orcs 2, 3, and 9. The initiative order is Orc 1, Orc 2, Tyrgar, Nermena, then Orc 3. Fairly simple. Let's see. When slow actions and fast actions. When it is your turn to act, you can perform 1 slow action and 1 fast action, or 2 fast actions. A slow action usually consists of rolling for a skill. A fast action is quicker and doesn't always require a dice roll, but can do so. See the list of typical slow and fast actions on the next page. How these work is explained in detail in the sections Close Combat and Ranged Combat. Prerequisites. Some actions can only be performed if certain conditions are met. Makes sense. Often this is a feature of the weapon you're using. Let's see. Describe your actions. Here we have some boxed text. Okay, in typical conflicts, a GM draws 1 initiative card per NPC. If there are a lot of NPCs, the number of combatants is above 10, the GM will split the NPCs into groups. That's usually the kind of advice that people give anyway. If you've got a bunch of monsters of the same type, group them up. Let's see. Okay, all the NPCs act in the group act at the same time. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, now on monsters. The kind of horrible creatures that are commonly called monsters don't act as regular enemies in combat. Monsters draw initiative normally, but then follow their own rules. All right, so we'll have to read more in the Game Master's Guide. Okay. So they are exceptions to some of these rules we're going to be bringing out, which makes sense. That's usually how it is. Okay, so when you describe your actions, when it's your turn, you're going to state which actions you wish to perform and roll dice as needed. Some actions will let your opponents perform a reactive action. And we'll see that in a little bit later. So slow actions: slashing, stabbing, punching, kicking, grappling, breaking free, shooting, persuading, taunting, casting spells, fleeing, crawling, charging, or healing somebody. And they have some things, right? So you can't heal somebody if there's an enemy, in melee with you, basically. You have to be there. It looks like they're using the more generalized ranges, which again, so they're doing their fast and slow different than Shadows of the Demon Lord. I believe Shadows of the Demon Lord had fast turns and slow turns. You took a fast turn, you could do one thing. I think if it was a fast turn, you could do a combination, a fast turn, you do one thing. A slow turn could be a combination of things. And again, it's been a while since I've read Shadows of the Demon Lord, so I apologize if I'm not getting that correctly. In this case, they're doing it a little bit differently, where you can do either 1 fast and 1 slow action on your turn, or 2 fast actions. So let's see there. So they're showing the skills, right? As you're shooting something, you have to have a ranged weapon, and you have to have the marksmanship skill. All right. Or maybe you don't have to have it. That's the skill that's associated with it. You can help others, and it costs you 1 action of the same type. So if you want to help somebody attack something, you need to use your slow action, because them attacking is a slow action, so you need to use your slow action to help. Pretty simple. All actions are refreshed at the beginning of each round. Cannot save unused actions. So use it or lose it. Zones and range. A zone is a room or an area of ground. How big a zone is varies from a few steps across up to about 25 meters. A zone is generally smaller in difficult terrain than an open terrain. The distance from one zone to the next is called one segment. In the official adventure sites, a numbered location on the map typically constitutes one zone. In random encounters during journeys, the GM can make a quick sketch of the area or simply describe it. Because we still don't know what a zone is. I'm getting the sense that, again, like Shadow of the Demon Lord, they're doing something akin to, they're not going to be counting feet. You're just going to be counting, are you basically in melee? Are you kind of near, which may put you kind of right outside melee? And then sort of, are you far away or further away? In which case you're in You're definitely, you're kind of ranged attack, but you're not close enough to say charge it. Or maybe you could if you had super fast speed, because you can go, one segment in a sense from near to melee, or one move would take you from far to near. I think that's what they're driving at. Here they have a table of fast actions, dodging, parrying, drawing your weapon, swinging your weapon. It's a heavy weapon, and I guess you have to use that before. So it's almost, basically, it looks like this swinging weapon means that doing a heavy weapon actually takes your fast and your slow action, because it's like the fast action is kind of winding it up, starting that swing. The slow action is then finishing off the rest of the attack. Getting up if you're prone, disarming, feinting, running, retreating, attacking from a grapple if you have already grappled somebody, readying a weapon, a ranged weapon, aiming, using a power word. I guess is that a spell, or is that a certain kind of spell? Using an item. Here we have an example, I guess, going back to the zones. The GM has drawn up a quick map of the area where Tirgar and Nermena face the orcs. When combat starts, the adventurers are in a zone next to the orcs. The adventurer's zone is open while the orcs' zone is rough. So the orcs, being at the edge of those woods or in the woods, are in a difficult terrain situation, whereas the adventurers are out in the open. So here we have the features of zones. It can be cramped, it's small, or has a low ceiling. Heavy weapons get a penalty. It's impossible to swing a weapon before a close combat attack. So I guess maybe you don't have to swing a heavy weapon, because obviously it's saying heavy weapons are at a penalty and you can't swing them, but you could still use them. Otherwise, they would say you just can't use them. So, but it might depend on the weapon. Maybe a heavy weapon that's a polearm style, doesn't need to be swung, is okay. But if you have a two-handed axe, it's your battle, big axe that you need to bring down, that you can't do that. Rough, you have to roll a move when you run into the zone. Failure means you get in, but you fall down. Open, it's basically open and flat. Ideal for mounted combatants. Can also be dark and foggy. I like these because they give you kind of keywords, right? You can easily just say, okay, hey, by the way, like in this case, I could see as a GM saying, all right, you guys, you're out here in the open plains. You see the orcs at the edge of the forest. Your terrain is open, but just so you're aware, you're moving into that forest. It is rough terrain. And then that tells the players, if they're, if they've gotten wrapped their mind around the system, okay, I understand what that means. I got to roll a move check if I'm going into the woods. Otherwise, I might slip, trip over a branch, whatever, a root, whatever, fall down. Borders and lines of sight. Another important feature of zones is the border between them. The border between zones affects both movement and ranged combat. Blocked. The border is blocked by a wall, a deep abyss, or something similar. You cannot pass the border between the zones, at least on a foot. Obscured. Something along the border of the zone blocks line of sight, but not movement. An example could be a doorway, shrubbery, or a curtain. Range attacks across the border are not possible, but movement is not affected. All right, so in the case of the forest, right, my first thought is say, okay, well, that also would be obscured, but then maybe not, because they're saying range attacks are not possible, but I would, again, just might be the way you have to play the system. If I say, hey, there's enough trees, enough cover that they are obscured, you can kind of see them, but you're not able to hit them with arrows. And that's just tough luck for you. But it's not blocked. Range categories. In conflict, the distance between you and your opponent is divided into 5 range categories. See the table on this page. The typical terrain column lists the types of terrain where the maximum line of sight usually matches that category. We can read more later. All right, so arm's length is basically in melee. Near, you're a few steps away. It's in the same zone. Might be a cave tunnel, a small room. You're a short distance away, which is up to 25 meters in a bordering zone. That might be dense forest, swamp, a large hall. I think they don't have to be both, right? It could be 25 meters away, or you're in a bordering zone. Long, you're up to 100 meters away. And typical terrain. So sorry, when they're saying typical terrain, what do they mean? Typical terrain column lists the types of terrain where the maximum line of sight usually matches that category. Okay, I see. So calling dense forest short would mean that your max line of sight is 25 meters. If you're in forested hills, city ruins, a gigantic hall, your line of sight is 100 meters, which is the length of that range category. And then distant, which is as far as the eye can see, right? You're only getting that if you're in kind of wide open plains or you're in the mountains, presumably in the mountains looking, down on something. So there we go. Okay, to move during combat, you use the run action, which is fast, or the crawl action, which is slow. This moves you from one zone to a neighboring zone or between near and arm's length distance from an enemy in the zone you're already in. No roll is required to run unless you're moving into a rough zone, in which case you need to roll for a move. So if you make it into that zone without falling and you're running, then I guess you'd only have to do that once. So at least the concept at this point is there's no, it's rough and that you have to roll every round. If you make it into the, I don't know, the forest, or I'm trying to think of something slippery, right? You make it onto the ice in one zone, say some frozen lake. You might roll to slip then, but you're not going to have to roll to slip every turn. But though presumably we could have an additional effect that does that, but at least as given. Close combat, if you have an active enemy at arm's length, you can't run away from them. Instead, you must use the retreat action. Doors, you can open an unlocked door with the use item action, which is fast. A locked door must either be opened by picking the lock or by breaking it down. A typical wooden door can take 5 points of damage before it falls apart. Most more sturdy doors require more force. Really massive doors also have an armor rating. Okay, so you gotta hack away at them. I was never big on hacking down the doors, or rolling the damage, I guess, rather. Just because it's just you rolling dice, just to kind of see. I don't know. I mean, I understand where you're trying to figure out essentially in the kind of a D&D old school sense of how many rounds it's taking you to do that, which could potentially mean either monsters catching up to you or monsters hearing you, something like that. But I'd rather almost just say, okay, make a roll, a strength tech or something, and that's how many rounds it's going to take you to do it. I don't know, something of that. Like, okay, it's 10 rounds to break down this massive door. I rolled strength 5. I rolled 5 over the number that I needed to. So instead of it taking 10 rounds, it's going to take 5 rounds, right? Something like combat rounds, something like that. Just seemed like it just never felt like a great moment. Just felt like I'm just rolling dice to roll dice with those things. Though if you're in combat and other things are going on, then rolling the dice has more attention to it. But when you're just at a locked door, or you need to break it down, it seemed kind of not very fun. Fleeing the conflict, if you're losing a fight, it might be better to retreat and perhaps return with backup. Yes. Don't think about retreat as some kind of form of cowardice or failure. You got to run. Come back stronger. You cannot flee in this way if you are trapped or surrounded. The GM has final say. You cannot use your roll to move past an opponent. You must flee in the same direction you came from. The GM can modify your roll depending on the terrain and the distance to the nearest opponent. See the table below. All right, so we got some fleeing modification. If the roll fails, you remain in combat with your opponent and cannot get away. You remain at the same distance as you were before. The GM can also inflict some additional negative consequences for you. You could attempt to flee again the next round. All right, this is one might need an example, and we have one. The adventurers and the orcs are in neighboring zones. The distance between the groups is one segment, i.e. short range. Oh. That wasn't what I wanted. I was hoping it was a fleeing example, but it's not. But I like it. I like the idea that you can try to get out, but that it does come down to some kind of roll. It's kind of a way of, again, going back to D&D type games, that often a place where the systems fall apart is on those chases and running away, where you just get into these kind of things where you can't. You know, they're moving so much, you're moving so much, they're moving so much, you move so much. How do you get those distances? How do you actually escape? Now, old school, they had rules for that. They actually had rules of things you could do, closing doors behind you, dropping treasure behind you to get intelligent enemies to stop chasing you, dropping food behind you if they're more animal. Those were things you could do. But in the modern game, they really de-emphasized those factors, so you end up in this weird limbo of we all have basically the same movement, so we're not really getting away from each other. So something like this, where you're kind of making a roll, and that's going to determine if you can kind of break out or not, is helpful. And I guess we'll learn more about retreating a little bit later. Ambushes and sneak attacks. The key to winning a conflict is often attacking when your enemy least expects it. Very true. You can achieve this in several different ways. You can try to sneak attack. When you stalk someone and your attack catches them unawares, it's called a sneak attack. First roll an opposed roll for sneak. You get a modification depending on how close you are. See the table. If you fail, your opponent spots you at your starting distance. Draw initiative. If you succeed, you get a free action, slow or fast, but not both, before you draw the initiative. Your target cannot dodge or parry a sneak attack. Excuse me. Sneak attacks are always done individually by one attacker against one target. Let's see. So you can sneak and then get a modification, and you don't have to be right on top of them to do it. I'm not sure what the I guess the advantage is they can't dodge or parry. I don't know how. Can you parry a ranged attack in this game? I'm not sure. But you just get one action and then it's on to initiative. Ambush. A special kind of sneak attack is an ambush. You lie in wait for your enemy and attack when he passes. When you ambush someone, you roll sneak as described above, but with a modification of +2, since it is the target and not the attacker that is moving. Ambushes can be carried out by a group and against a group. This follows the usual rules for sneak for the attackers, whoever has the lowest sneak skill level roll, and not for the targets, whoever has the highest scout. Oh, and for the targets, whoever has the highest scout roll. All right, so it goes by the same kind of rules, but you get a little bonus because you're in wait. Close combat. When you attack in close combat, you use the melee skill. Close combat usually happens at arm's length. With some weapons, you can attack from near. See the weapons below. Weapons. When you enter close combat, it is wise to have a weapon in hand. Weapons give you a gear bonus for your roll, increase the damage caused, and allow you to perform actions that are harder or even impossible without a weapon. Several close combat weapons are described in the table on page 101. Shield. Carrying a shield is also very useful in close combat. You can parry attacks with it, but you can also use it to shove opponents to the ground. Shields are described later on. We'll see a stance. To be able to attack an opponent in close combat, you have to stand up on your feet. If you are prone, you must first spend a fast action to get up. Get up! Before you can attack. The exception is the shove action, which can be done even if you are prone. While you are prone, standing enemies get +2 on all close combat attacks against you. All right, so they're not letting you attack from prone. That's okay. I mean, I know that there are examples where it happens, and you might think, but I can stab in the ankles, or I can swing my sword up, but they're just saying, hey, look, you got to get up. We are just assuming that those attacks are pretty futile. Let's see, actions. There are several actions to choose from in close combat, all of which are described below. Okay. And different actions are effective in different situations, also okay. I'm not sure why the text is in that funky bold here, because this is a PDF. Looks like something that would have been if my printer were kind of running out of ink when I was printing this, but there's no printing. So we also have reactive actions. When you attack an aware opponent in close combat, they can dodge or parry to avoid being hit. The defender must declare if they are going to dodge or parry before you roll for your attack. Dodge and parry are called reactive actions since they are performed immediately and they break the normal initiative order in the round. However, they do count toward your 2 available actions in the round, one slow and one fast. For every reactive action you perform, you get one less action when it is your turn, and once you have used both your actions during the round, you can no longer dodge or parry. Talents can modify this, however. Dodging and parrying in combat, close combat are technically not opposed rolls, and they can be pushed. All right, so this is interesting. So you almost want to be attacked before you're attacking if you're going to be the dodgy parry sort. because if you use both your actions, then you can't. Or that means you're going to want to save an action in reserve if you're in close combat. You're going to use your slow, which I guess makes sense, right? Because slow actions are most of your attack actions. And if you're going to be in melee, or as they say, close combat, and you're not leaving, then maybe you want to bank that fast action so that you have your dodge or parry to do something. Unless you're going full offense and you want to use that, which I guess that kind of, you have a big heavy weapon and you want to do that pre-swing thing, which I guess I want to read about what that really means. But I like it. And I like the fact that if you have multiple opponents and you dodge one, you parry the other one, well, now you're stuck. So you got to kind of think a little bit on how you're going to use those. And it means you can't really abuse them because you only have two and you only have two actions. So if you get yourself into too much hot water like that, you can't just be the constantly dodging, parrying machine. Unless, of course, you have some talents that give you more attempts or something of that nature. All right, so slow actions, right? You could slashing at something, stabbing at something. You're punching, kicking, biting, grappling. Dodge is fast. Parrying is also fast. You get a bonus to help you dodge if your attacker is slashing. When you dodge, you fall prone. Wait, what is that? You cannot. Hold on. I guess I got to read the whole thing. Dodge. You throw yourself out of the way of your opponent's attack. Reactive action, roll, move, not melee. You cannot use a weapon. If the attacker slashes, you get a +2 bonus. Every success you roll eliminates a success from the attacker's roll. Any excess successes have no effect. When you dodge, you fall prone. You can choose to remain standing at the cost of a -2 penalty. Okay, so that's cool, right? So it is literally you are diving out of the way of something. If they're slashing at you, you get a bonus to that to try to dive. If you want to try to make it a kind of more matrixy thing, you get a penalty. So of course, if someone's slashing at you, you could just make it a straight roll, right? Because you get the bonus, the penalty kicks in, and they cancel each other out. Parrying, you're blocking. Now you're rolling melee, and you're using the gear bonus of your shield or your weapon. If you parry with a weapon that lacks the parrying feature, you're going to take a penalty. And if the attacker is stabbing you, get a +2 bonus when you parry with a shield, but a -2 penalty if you parry with a weapon, right? If you're stabbing, it's kind of hard to block. You don't have as much notice of things, but it might be easier because it doesn't have. There's not a lot of area, so that it's you can block it more with your shield. And of course, if they're swinging, the shield might not help quite as much, but you see it coming, so you're able to move things, that get your sword up, whatever. So that's cool. I mean, it definitely adds a little bit more. You definitely have to do more tracking, right? So it's kind of that thing where they're laying it, and this is why they're not just saying as a slow action, just attack, because they're going to want you to say, and if you're the GM, say about your monster, the monster is slashing, right? The monster is biting. Hey, on my PC, my character is stabbing, right? Not just using the sword, but stabbing, because it's important whether they're slashing or stabbing or biting. You can draw your weapon. Okay, here's the part. You can swing your weapon. You swing your melee weapon to make your upcoming strike more powerful. No roll is required, but this fast action requires a heavy weapon. Must be performed directly before a slash or stab in the same round. If the attack is successful, the damage increases by 1. So yeah, that's what I thought. It's kind of like you're really winding up that giant hammer to take somebody out. Standing up, shoving, disarming, fainting. Let's see about disarming, because that's another one of those skills that in D&D terms can be, like in 3.5 and stuff, in 3rd edition. I know maybe earlier too, but I definitely remember in those editions, it's one of those things that could kind of be spammed. You try to knock the weapon from your opponent's hands. Roll melee and your weapon's gear bonus. Disarming an opponent wielding a one-handed weapon requires 1 success. A two-handed weapon requires 2. However, see the firm grip talent. If you succeed, your opponent drops their weapon, which lands at arm's length. Any excess successes have no effect. You cannot disarm a shield. Your enemy can parry or dodge your disarm. Okay. So they're basically saying you can drop the weapon, but it's going to land at your feet. There's not the concept of trying to mess around with how far away it goes and what it does. So it's momentary. Obviously, if you disarm them, that takes away their parry action. I mean, assuming they don't have a shield. If they have a shield, then they still can parry, presumably. But then they have to spend an action to pick up their weapon. So that means that if they're going to do that, then they have one less action, right? If they trying to block something later on, they can pick something up, but then they can't use it. So I think it's a nice balance, and it's great that you're necessarily going to be wanting to disarm all the time, because that also means that you're not taking an action. Because if you disarm an attack, well, that's great, but then you've lost your ability to parry or dodge. So I feel like that, not playing it, but honestly, but reading it feels like that's fairly good. I would say that this doesn't seem to encourage people to just spam it over and over again, but one never knows. Feinting is kind of cool. You trade initiative cards with an opponent at arm's length or near. If your close combat weapon can reach that far, the new initiative order takes effect the next round. No rolls required. So you can feint, but again, it uses up one of your 2 actions. But you can move up. So you could have a really slow initiative, and you decide to feint, and the guy you're fighting happens to have a very fast initiative. Suddenly, you switch spots. Here's the retreat, which I was interested in. This action must be used instead of run if you have an active enemy at arm's length. Brings you to near range. Roll for move. If you fail your move, but your enemy gets a free attack against you, a slash, stab, or punch that doesn't count towards their actions in the round in which you can't parry or dodge. All right, so it's basically they've just reworked a little bit the kind of opportunity attack. Instead, you're just going to make the roll. If you succeed, you've broken free. If not, they get a swing at you. So it's a little bit like disengage, I guess, in 5th edition terms, but you don't get the free escape. Or you get an opportunity of free escape, and that's not guaranteed. Okay, so here, let's read through the example. It's not very long. The fight between the adventurers and the orcs begin. Or the fight now begins. Yeah, that's right. Between the adventurers and the orcs begins. Orc 1 uses his 2 actions to run towards Tirgar, first from short to near, then to arm's length. Orc 2 does the same, but it approaches near Mena. Then it's Tirgar's turn. His axe is already drawn, so he uses his fast action to shove Orc 1 to the ground, which succeeds. He then proceeds to use his slow action to slash the Orc, who has already used up his actions in the round and can't parry or dodge. Tirgar rolls the following dice: 4 base dice for his strength, 2 skill dice for his melee skill, 1 skill die for his axe fighter talent, and 2 gear dice for his axe's weapon bonus, and 2 bonus skill dice because his opponent is prone. That's a lot of dice. He rolls 3 successes. The first success means he hits. The next 2 successes, combined with his axe's weapon damage of 2, result in 4 points of damage to the orc, who is broken. Near Mena's turn. She draws her sword, fast action, and tries to stab orc number 2, but misses. Orc number 3 runs to arm's length from Tirgar, then the round is over. Okay, so I guess it's a good idea, right? How the flow is. You're going to be rolling a ton of dice, but you need 6s. So it's not guaranteed that even rolling a ton of dice, you're going to get a ton of successes. I like the things you can do, right? So the orcs were charging in. They were very hasty, but that meant that the one orc, or basically all the orcs that got there, were kind of exposed in combat with Tirgar because they had nothing to do but just hope that he didn't succeed. Unfortunately for that one orc, he did make enough successes, first shoving the orc down. And again, right, I like the tactics here because the orcs rushed in. They had no more moves that round, so they went first in the round. But now Tirgar, his player knows they can't do anything to me in the round, so I don't need to bank any actions to dodge or parry. I can make that. I could have made, say, I couldn't make 2 attacks, but I could, do that shove action to try to get me a really good, hit. On the other one, doing that, took down one of the orcs, or at least put them in broken, and we don't know yet. I think broken is obviously your 0, that kind of dying, but they use broken. I don't know if in their thing, orcs and things like that, if they just broken means they're off the board, or if they can be revived, or how that works. I guess we'll should get there pretty soon because we're in the combat chapter. But they haven't covered it yet. And I'm thinking we're coming up on 2 hours. So combat, this might be the last chapter. I don't know how much more I have to go. So let me try to move a little bit faster. We have advanced close combat. I'm just going to read this quickly. Close combat is brutal and unpredictable. Whoever outmaneuvers their opponent and manages to find an opening is usually victorious. For more intense close combat, you can add a tactical element by using the following system, which is based on the so-called hidden combinations. The system requires you have access to the custom card deck. Okay, so I'm going to skip over this. It seems interesting. I feel like in the example they gave and what they've already given us, there is some tactical depth there, but obviously it means that you can take it up a notch with even more tactical depth if you want it. But just in interest of time, I'm going to slide past the combat cards and that stuff. We have ranged combat. Let's see. When you shoot someone at range, it's harder to hit your target the further away they are. At short range, you get a -1 penalty, and at long range, a -2. At arm's length, you get -3, since it's very hard to draw a beat on an opponent that is close to you. This is true. This does not apply if you're shooting at a defenseless or completely oblivious opponent at arm's length. In that case, you get a +3 attack. Okay, so interestingly enough, there's no positive modifiers for distance. You're either near distance, which is optimal, but then it's just 0. Otherwise, you're too close unless they're oblivious to you or they're defenseless, and then they're further away, so you're taking on penalties. And again, you can ready a weapon, you can aim, which is going to give you a bonus. You can shoot, roll marksmanship. You can still use your dodge. You can parry a ranged attack, which is cool. So you can get your kind of monk-esque chop down the arrows as they're coming in. Just like in close combat, your opponent must declare if he intends to dodge or parry before you roll to attack, and they are reactive actions and break the normal initiative. So they work the same. Oh, here's a little interesting thing. So they're putting some kind of social conflicts in the combat channel. Social combat, if you will. Sometimes you can make things go your way without resorting to violence. Instead, you trick or convince your opponent without drawing your weapon. This might even be possible in the midst of combat if the GM judges it plausible. For non-violent conflicts, use the manipulation skill. So this is basically, I guess, if you're in combat but you want to... And I was going to say, I hadn't seen anything on reactions or morale yet, so maybe this will play into it. That's one thing that they haven't talked about yet. What you ask of your opponent or what you want them to do must be within reason. No NPC will agree to do anything or act completely against their own interests, no matter how good your role is. That's good to know, and I'm glad that they just baked it into the rules. Monsters. Many monsters are so savage or dim-witted that they simply cannot be swayed by words, no matter how silvery your tongue is. Read more about monsters in the bestiary. This is true, but as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I like that in, I think in OD&D and maybe in BX2, they have this element of, look, if it's a monster that's chasing you and you can drop some food behind you, they may just take that food and leave. And even if it's an intelligent enemy, if you picked up some treasure, you drop a bag of gold coins behind you, the goblins might just stop, take the coins, and leave. So you did have some options, even if you couldn't necessarily speak to the monster or the monster's not intelligent. Resolution: when you try to convince or bluff someone, make an opposed roll of manipulation versus their insight. If you successfully manipulate your opponent, they must either do what you want or immediately attack you with physical violence. Even if your opponent chooses to do what you want, they can still demand something in return. GM decides what that entails, but it should be reasonable enough for you to be able to meet those demands. It's up to you to accept or not. And then they go over some negotiating positions. You've got, again, so this is similar to morale. I kind of wish they had framed it in morale for other purposes, but basically, the better you are, your position, the more easily you can potentially manipulate them. And then your chances go up depending on how your reputation is relative to theirs. If you manipulate a group, you're going to manipulate the leader. The range. So you usually got to be close enough that basically they can kind of get a good look at you and hear you. So you got to be near range, but maybe, it could be further away depending on how things are going. The fiction and what the GM says. Some artifacts might help you. Here we get into weapons. I am interested in what kind of weapon attributes. We have grip. You need 1 or 2 hands. Bonus, how many gear dice you can roll when you're using it. Damage. base weapon damage. How many points of damage to strength your opponent suffers? If you roll extra successes, you deal additional damage. Which means you can have some interesting weapons, or you can have a weapon that's very low damage, but maybe has a high gear bonus. I don't know what that would be. I think maybe a rapier might be like, I don't know, but rapiers can be pretty, I don't know what it might be, but something that, say, I don't know, a whip. That a whip alone, you just kind of hit it. Yeah, it hurts, but it's not that bad. But if you're really skillful, maybe you get it around the neck. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad example. I don't know what a good example is, but damn it, I like the fact that I could have a low damage, high gear bonus weapon for some interesting um, choices to make in gear, which usually are downplayed often, right? It's like, oh, this one does D8, oh, this one does D6, or this one does D12, and that's kind of it. Seems like you could have more variances there if you wanted them. Okay, we got a table. I am not going to go through them all. I'll just look at a couple. So a Morning Star, that might be that one, right? Where it doesn't necessarily have high damage because it's kind of funky to hit, but has more gear dice. That might be a good one. Let's see what they say about Morning Stars. +2 bonus, 2 damage. Let's see, and it is blunt. So let me go back. So wait, what is the bonus? Is what? Oh, how many gear dice? Okay. So you're gonna roll 2, or not the Morning Star. I was thinking of Flail. No, Flail they do 2 damage, but only 1. See, I would have done differently. I was thinking. So sorry, I didn't mean to wait. The Morning Star is it's like the mace with points. The Flail is where it's on the chain. I meant the Flail. So when you're using a Flail, I feel like that one. There's a lot of ways you can do not a lot of damage with a flail because it's kind of awkward. It can be a little awkward. It can be a little difficult. And in my mind, anyway, I'm sure I can go look on YouTube and find some videos, some historical flail fighters that will prove me wrong. But in my mind, anyway, it can be more difficult to get a hit in. But if you are skillful, you can really do a lot of damage because you can maneuver it above and around shields easier. It's harder to parry if you can really, certainly with a blade. So I could see saying, hey, it really only does 1 damage, but it's got a high level of skill or a high level of gear bonus in that if you can get there, do that. But maybe I've got it all wrong. I don't know. But here we have a whole bunch of them. It looks like the most bonuses you're getting is 2. So the most gear dice you can roll those is 2. And the most damage we're looking at is 3 if you're using a heavy warhammer, or a 2-handed axe, or a 2-handed sword. So there you have it. And we get some pictures. So yes, I meant a flail, not a Morning Star. Halberd. We get some ranged weapons. Heavy crossbow does the most damage at 3. Only gives you 1 gear die. Interesting. Crossbows give you 2 gear die, but do more. Or longbows, give you 2 gear dice, but do less damage. I'm not sure I would have a longbow as less than a light crossbow, or maybe I would reverse it. So I would give longbow 3 and then 1, kind of reversing the heavy crossbow. But that's me. But okay. And we have some more of those. Features indicate which weapons. Features indicate which features the weapon has. Possible features are light, heavy, edged, pointed, blunt, parrying, hook. I think these all make a lot of sense. Welcome everybody who's joined fairly. I just looked and it got a bump in folks who are watching live. Welcome. Going through the combat chapter, we're into weapons. This is for Forbidden Lands, the core rules. There's a link to it on drive-through up in the first part of the chat if you want to take a look at the overall description. This is part 2. Part 1, I went through a lot of the character creation stuff. I got into skills and combat. In this one, I don't know how much time left I'm going to have, so I'm going to try to make it out of this combat chapter, but I may end it after this, depending, just because I'm conscious of the time. Let's see what else they have. We're getting into damage now and armor, which is good because they haven't really talked much about it. You can suffer damage in many ways. Here are the 3 most common. You're rolling Banes. So in case you missed it, when you're rolling dice, you're rolling a lot of 6-sided dice. If you roll a 1, it's called a Bane. If you roll a 6, it's a success. Banes only come into effect. They're basically bad things that can happen, but generally speaking, only if you push a roll, which follows that Call of Cthulhu type system where you can roll and you can decide to just accept the result of that first roll, or you can push your luck. If you push your luck, then you're going to suffer these whatever banes are there. So that's banes. Let's see. So you can roll banes, and that might get damage, give you damage. You can also get damage from attacks, obviously, and from magic, which is also obvious. So here we're getting into armor. By wearing leather, chainmail, or a full suit of plate armor, you can protect your body from damage to strength. See the list of various kinds of armor below. Okay. Effective armor is determined by its armor rating. When you suffer damage from a physical attack, you roll a number of gear dice equal to the armor rating. For every success you roll, decreases damage by 1. This roll does not count as an action and cannot be pushed. So that's kind of cool. So it is basically like damage resistance, but it's not automatic. You're just going to get a higher chance, obviously, with the more dice you roll. If any damage penetrates your armor, its armor rating is decreased. Every bane you roll reduces the armor rating by 1. Ooh. If the armor absorbed all the damage, any banes rolled have no effect. Armor can be repaired. Natural armor is not degraded in this way. I feel like I need to read that again. Okay. If any damage gets through, you reduce the armor rating for, let's see, every bane you roll reduces your armor rating 1. So if your armor absorbs all the damage, okay. So any damage that gets through, then you take damage for the banes you rolled. I kind of feel like that could use an example. So I'm not sure I'm getting that absolutely correctly, but I'm trying to hustle here. So I'm going to leave that for later, and let's go on to helmets. You can only wear one type of armor at a time, but you can combine body armor with a helmet. Add the armor rating of any helmet you wear to the rating of your body armor before you roll. If the armor is degraded, you can choose if it is the body armor or the helmet that is damaged. All helmets have an extra effect. If you suffer one of the critical injuries, let's see, 65 for a splash wound, 64 for a stab wound, or 64 to 66 for a blunt force. Roll a number of gear dice equal to the armor rating of the helmet. If you roll one or more successes, the critical injury is changed to the 11 to 12 blunt force injury instead. This will reduce the armor rating of the helmet to 0. However, we haven't covered these critical injuries, so I have no idea what those mean yet. Excuse me. So I have no idea what that means. But basically, you can the helmet's good point is, besides the fact that it's another armor piece that you can wear down, can help avoid some nasty injuries, I guess. Well, and I hear my family is arriving, so I'm going to try to wrap this up and then sign off. Cover: when enemies are shooting at you, hunkering down behind cover, preferably something solid, can save your life. Taking cover behind something counts as a fast action. Cover has an armor rating and works like armor, but only against ranged attacks. As opposed to armor, cover is not degraded. Cover can be combined with armor. Roll for cover first, then armor. Okay, cool. Here we got some shields. I got some other armor and helmets table. So plate mail gets you 8 dice to roll, whereas a studded leather cap just gives you 1, but of course it's just a helmet. Leather gets you 2, but chainmail, let's see, chainmail is heavy, and you get 3 against. So you get 6 normally, but only 3 against arrows and stabs, which is kind of, that's somewhat historical for chainmail. And plate armor gives you a penalty to move. All right, and hopefully this is the last bit because I gotta jump off. I like that studded leather cap. Very, very fashionable. Let's see. Oh, I got a. Hey man, glad I caught you live. Just dropping in from the UK to say hi. Can't stay long. We'll catch up on the recording later. Have you got any more campaign diaries in the pop line? Yes. So, not to jump off into a tangent, but yes, I actually have a few. I need to combine them. Essentially, what happened was my group was 2 players, and then one of them kind of had to drop. So we had to recruited some other players. Kind of went through that, and I actually want to cover those in the diaries. It's just been a matter of time I have to do. But yes, I'm going to do kind of a big, giant campaign diary recap. Not a ton has happened, but I have had some like I said, some party changes, but they're actually done some really fun things, and I do want to get back into doing it. So yes, it is coming. But thanks for jumping in and saying hey from the UK. I appreciate you. All right, so quickly, if I can, broken. When an attribute score reaches 0, you are broken. This means that you are put out of action in one way or another. Exactly what it means to be broken depends on the attribute that has been depleted. Strength, you're knocked senseless. Agility, you collapse from exhaustion. Wits, you are paralyzed by fear. Empathy, you break down into despair. I like all these. I'm not going to go super into the details. But this is, I guess, if strength goes down, that's when you can get a critical injury, and that's generally in combat. You're taking strength damage. Wits, I don't know yet what would cause you to be paralyzed by fear or confusion. I mean, I can imagine spells, potentially monster stuff. Empathy is despair. The coup de grace. An opponent who's lost all strength or agility is defenseless. If it's an intelligent being and you want to give him a coup de grace and kill him outright, you must fail an empathy roll. Even if the roll fails, you must spend 1 willpower point and suffer 1 point of damage to empathy. Killing in cold blood is not as easy as you might think. If you have the cold-blooded talent, you can kill defenseless enemies without these negative effects. I like it. Because, yeah, it is nasty business to go in and do that sort of thing. And there's a cost there, right? There is that you are taking some kind of damage. So don't do it willy-nilly, or pick up the cold-blooded talent, and then you can do it to your heart's content. Maybe they should just call that the murder hobo talent. The fastest, so we have recovery. The fastest way to recover from being broken is for someone else to treat you by rolling for healing or performance for wits or empathy. That's also interesting. This is a slow action but cannot be performed with an enemy at arm's length. If the roll is successful, you immediately recover a number of points in the broken attribute equal to the number of successes rolled. Further rolls have no effect, and the same person can only try once. No one helps you within D6 hours. You recover anyway and get 1 point back in the relevant attribute. Okay, so, and I guess we're going to get into critical injuries as far as strength goes, but there's other times if you're there, you will kind of recover. I like the fact that they have 2 different skills. One gives you is healing your physical stuff. One's healing your more mental stuff. Further recovery, once back on your feet, you will recover all remaining lost attribute points by resting or sleeping for a quarter day. This assumes you are not hungry, thirsty, or suffering from another condition that blocks recovery. Okay. Now we get to critical injuries. Being broken is always bad, but having your strength or wits broken is especially dangerous. It can trigger long-term effects and even cost you your life. The critical damage tables are found at the back of the book, so I'm not going to go through them right now. You're going to roll a D66 on the table. Relevant to the latest form of damage you have suffered: slash wounds, stab wounds, or blunt force, or horror for. So those were slash, stabbing, or blunt force for strength. Horror for wits. If your critical injury is listed as lethal, someone must make a successful healing roll to save you. Otherwise, you die within the time indicated when the time indicated has passed. If you recover attribute points before you die, you can attempt to heal yourself. The roll gets a -2 penalty. Each person trying to heal you can only roll once. Instant death. Note that there are a small number of critical injuries that kill you outright. If you roll either of these, you draw your last breath in the Forbidden Lands. Time to make a new character. Them's the breaks. Sorry. Healing. Each critical injury has a specific effect that you suffer during the healing time indicated, measured in days. Care. If someone manages to heal you during the process of healing a critical injury, the remaining healing time is reduced by half. Any earlier roll to save your life does not count towards this. A new roll is required to reduce the healing time. And then let's see, we have attribute points. Note that you can recover all your lost attribute points but still suffer the effects of a critical injury. That's probably good to note. Let's see, non-typical damage. I'm just going to see where we pushed damage. I like these dwarven weapons, by the way. Kind of cool. Nice flavor. There's one case where you don't risk any critical injury when broken, when you push a roll so hard that you break yourself. This is very rare, but it can happen. This means you never kill yourself by pushing a roll. That's good to know. Take note, GMs. Characters cannot kill themselves by their own pushes. Oops. And finally, we get to some conditions. I'm just going to rattle through these because they seem to be fairly standard, right? We've got hungry, thirsty, sleepy, cold. You can have fear put into you, and then you can be in the dark. You can be in darkness. You can get damage from falling, damage from drowning, poison. They have different kinds of poisons. We got lethal poisons, paralyzing poisons, sleeping poisons, hallucinogenic poisons, and they also have diseases, which I think are going to be kind of poisons, but on a slower time scale. Medical aid that we can give people. We can ride animals. And again, I apologize for going through this quickly, but I really just want to finish this chapter because I got to skate. And then we're on to magic. All right. So I'm going to have to call it quits for this stream. We got through a good chunk. This is a big book. And if I had known it had been this long when I started, I might have saved it for when I could do it all in one shot. But that's how the cookie crumbles. But have a great rest of your day. I will pick this up on the next one. Obviously, feel free to put any comments when this goes up on the YouTube if you have any other questions about it or things that you want to cover. But I will attempt to go from chapter 6 onward the next time. But that was Forbidden Lands, the core rules. Again, the drive-through RPG link is at the beginning of the chat. It will also be in the description. But take it easy. So long. Game on. I'll talk to you later.